10 Talmud, Part 5. Today we're going to study Tractate Shabbat, page 88a, Daf Peches Amud Aleph. The topic is the nature of how the Jewish people received the Torah, how God gave the Torah, and whether the Jewish people received it voluntarily or under duress. The Torah tells us in Shmos, chapter 19, verse 16, says the following: Vahi bayom Ha-Shishi, on the third day of preparation for receiving the Torah, which was the 6th day of Sivan, Biyos HaBoker, in the morning, Vahi kolos ubrakim, there were sounds and lightning, Va'anan kaved al har, and a great cloud covered the mountain, V'kol shofar chazak ma'od, and the sound of the shofar getting louder and louder, V'yacharad kol ha'am, and the nation trembled in preparation for the receiving of the Torah, Asher b'machaneh, that were in the camp, they trembled. The next verse says, Vayotze Moshe es ha'am, and Moshe brought the nation closer, Likras Elokim, to meet God, Mina machaneh, from the camp to meet God, Vayisyatzvu betachti sahar, and they stood at the foot of the mountain. Now the words Vayisyatzvu, they established themselves, they stood betachti sahar. It does not say on the bottom of the mountain. That would say betacha sahar, at the foot of the mountain. It says betachti sahar, in the bottom of the mountain, right underneath the mountain. That is what the Talmud is going to comment on. So on your screen you'll see now the text of the Talmud in Shabbat, page 88a, and it says the following, explaining the words Vayisyatzvu betachti sahar, and they stood at the foot, the deeper foot of the mountain. What does that mean? Says the Gemara, Melamed shekafa HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleihem esahar kegigis. Hashem took the Mount Sinai, lifted it up, inverted it upside down like a cask. And God said, Va'amar lahem, he said to them, Im atem mekablim haTorah, if you want to receive the Torah, mutav, the all is well and good. V'im lav, but if you do not accept the Torah, I will drop the mountain on your heads, and here you will die. Amar Rav Acha bar Yaakov, mikan moda Rabba loraisa. From here we see the Jewish people have a defense to their acceptance of the Torah. They accepted it under duress. God took the mountain and put it over their heads and said, if you want the Torah, great. If you don't, I'm going to drop it on your heads. Now this does not sound like a voluntary acceptance of the Torah. And the question is asked, the glaring question is asked, well, why were they forced to accept the Torah? It sounds like there was not a voluntary acceptance of the Torah. So what the Gemara is explaining here is the words of the Torah, which says that they stood betachti sahar, at the bottom of the mountain. What does it mean, betachti sahar, that they were underneath the mountain? It means that God took the mountain of Mount Sinai, inverted it over their heads, and said, you're going to stand under this mountain, tachti sahar, and if you accept the Torah, great. And if you don't, I'm going to drop the mountain on your heads. So it wasn't that they stood at the foot of the mountain, around the mountain, on the edge of the mountain. Rather, the Talmud is explaining here that God took the mountain over their heads, and God inverted it as a cask with a point pointing down on their heads and said, if you want the Torah, great. If you don't, then I will drop it on your heads. This appears as if the Torah was forced upon us, that we accepted it under duress. And we know that any contract which is accepted under duress is called a frustrated contract. It's not a valid contract. So how could we say that we are obligated to keep the Torah when God forced it upon us? Why did he force it upon us? And how could that be a valid contract, a valid covenant with the Jewish people, that the Jewish people were forced to accept the Torah? Until now, we've read the Talmud on a superficial level. Level 1, it's called Bikius. We've gotten an overview. We've read the words of the Talmud, but we have not gone into depth and understanding the deeper meaning of the Talmud and the commentaries of what they say. Now we're going to study Be'iyun. Iyun means in depth. We're going to go deeper into the meaning of this passage, understand on a deeper level what the Talmud is teaching us. This is called Iyun because it's based on the eye. The eye looks deeper under the well, the ma'ayan, the same word ma'ayan, well. We're going to go deeper into the well, says Rav Moshe Shapiro, my Rebbe. We're going to go deeper, ma'ayan, we're going to me'ayin. We're going to investigate deeper by looking deeper with our eyes, in-depth investigation of what this passage means. There are many interpretations of this Talmudic statement, but I'm going to share with you 4 of them. So the first one is from the Rama, Rav Moshe Isserles, in Torah Samincha Drasha Zayin, and he says, quoting the Chumash, the Torah, in chapter 1, verse 31, and it says in the Torah the following: Vayara Elokim es kol asher asa v'nei tov la'od. God saw that everything he had done, and it is very good. Vayi erev vayivoker yom Ha-Shishi. It was evening and morning, the 6th day. Until this point in the Torah, every day that's mentioned in the creation of the world is referred to as, in the singular, Yom Sheni, 2nd day, Yom Shlishi, 3rd day, Yom Revi'i, 4th day, Yom Chamishi, 5th day. But only here on the 6th day of creation does the Torah say Yom Ha-Shishi, the 6th day. Rashi says, quoting our Gemara in Shabbos Peiches, page 88a, a little further in the Gemara, it says the following: Davar acher, Yom Ha-Shishi, kulam tuluyim ve'omdim. All of creation was waiting and dependent on the 6th day, but it's not referring to the 6th day of creation. It's referring to a different 6th day, Ha-Shishi, the, capital T, the 6th day. Which 6th day is that? Hu Shishi b'Sivan, the 6th day of Sivan, the month of Sivan, Hamuchan Lematan Torah, ready to receive the Torah. You can see this Rashi here on your screen. The Rama comments on this Rashi and says, if the Jewish people were not going to receive the Torah on the 6th day of Sivan, then the whole world would have been returned to Tohu Vavohu, V'choshech al pnei Sahom. The Breshis, the Torah began with, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth, and the world was Tohu Vavohu, void and chaos, V'choshech al pnei Tehom, and dark on the face of the deep. And the world was waiting for the 6th day of creation, not the 6th day of creation, but the 6th day of the creation of the purpose of the world. And that is Yom Ha-Shishi, the 6th day of Sivan, the 6th day of the month of Sivan, so that when God turned the cask over our head and said, you have to take the Torah, so God waited until the 6th day of Sivan, and he turned the mountain over our heads like a cask, like a barrel, and said, if you receive the Torah, then good. Why is it good? Because the world will then have a purpose. The world will have a sense of destiny, because the purpose of the world is to have a moral standing. And without the Torah, the world is just going to keep going without morality, without a purpose, without a guide, without a sense of direction and destiny. And therefore the Torah provides that destiny. So the Rama says that Hashem turned the mountain over our heads to fulfill these words of Rashi, and in the Gemara Peiches in Shabbos, that the world was going to be tohu vavohu, going to be wasted and chaos and in turmoil until and unless we receive the Torah. And therefore Hashem had to turn the mountain over our heads in order to bring about the completion, bring about the destiny of the world through our acceptance and through that partnership between Hashem giving us the Torah and we are receiving the Torah. God gave the Torah, Matan Torah, and we were Kabbalas Torah, the receiving the Torah. That is the purpose of God turning the mountain over our heads. That's the first idea. The second deeper commentary, Be'iyun commentary on this Talmudic passage, comes from the Maharal in Tiferes Yisrael Lamed Beis. He says, it could not be left to chance. It could not be left to choice for the Jewish people to say, we will accept or not accept the Torah. Therefore, God had to turn the mountain over our heads and to force us to accept the Torah, because then we would have said, oh, the Torah is optional. We could take it, we could not take it. God wanted to convey to us and to the world that the world needs the Torah. The world needs, it's necessary for the world's fruition and destiny and purpose and meaning to have a Torah and have the Torah. And therefore, God turned the mountain over our heads and said, you have no choice. You must accept the Torah because it's not optional. If we would have said, oh, we had an option, we had free will to accept the Torah or not, then we would think the Torah is a nice book. It's a nice cultural idea that we have to keep the Torah and we have to have some sort of concept of morality. No, God said, according to the Maharal, that God had to turn the mountain over our heads in order to show to the world the Torah is necessary. The Torah is absolute truth, absolute necessity, and therefore there could be no free will here. And therefore we have no option to accept the Torah or not. It had to be given, it had to be received, and therefore the meaning of God turning the mountain over our heads is to show to us the Torah is obligatory. It's not optional. And therefore Torah needs to be given, needs to be here in this world, and God had to force our hand to accept the Torah. And this is one of the rare times in the Torah that God suspends free will, because the giving of the Torah is not subject to our free will. It's necessary, required. From then on, after the Torah was given, we have an option. We have a free will to whether we want to have a close relationship with God or not. If we do follow the Torah, then we have a relationship with God's reality. We tune ourselves into reality. We become part of reality. If we choose not to, that's our choice. But the world has to have that option. And therefore, for the world to have that option, God had to force our hand, turn the mountain over our heads like a cask, like a barrel, and say, this is necessary. This is required. And the world needs to have the Torah, and therefore he suspended free will. By suspending the mountain over our heads, he suspended free will, and that was absolutely necessary. The third deeper aspect of this understanding is that God turned the mountain over our heads according to the Baal HaTanya, Rav Shner Zalman of Liadi, who wrote the Tanya, who said the following. He said that God turned the mountain over our heads like a chuppah, out of love. And there are instances where we have midrashim which talk about the flowering of Mount Sinai and the beauty of Mount Sinai, and therefore he took Mount Sinai over our heads like a chuppah and gave it to us out of love. Mount Sinai is a chuppah over our heads. The Torah itself is our ring in a relationship of kiddushin, of marriage to God. God is the groom, we are the bride, as it's stated in Shir HaShirim, the Song of Songs, that God is the groom and we, the Jewish people, are the bride. That relationship began with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, beginning to believe in God, the process of going down to Egypt, the process of coming out of Egypt, and then arriving 50 days later at Mount Sinai, and then God gave us our marriage document. He gave us the Torah, which is more than the ketubah. It is the ring of betrothal between God as the groom, as in Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, God is the groom, and we, Knesset Yisrael, the Jewish nation, is the bride, and we receive the Torah under the Chuppah, under Mount Sinai, over our heads. It was not forced upon us, it was lovingly given to us, according to the Baal HaTanya. It was lovingly given to us as a matter of love. And the fourth in-depth concept of how the Torah was given to us with the Torah over our heads is explained by the Meshech Chochmah, Meir Simcha of Devinsk, who said the following. Based on the fact that there were 10 miraculous plagues sent by God through the hand of Moses to bring the Jewish people out of Egypt, the miraculous leaving of Egypt, of 3 million Jews leaving Egypt after 210 years of slavery, of the splitting of the sea 7 days later, the miraculous splitting of the sea and the drowning of the Egyptians and the Jewish people becoming free, bringing to fruition the concept of freedom from oppression, which is a cause taken up by many groups around the world. And this symbol of freedom, of going out of Egypt, of leaving oppression and going to a world of freedom, is a symbol that is used around the world by people who have been oppressed, and it's taken on by many people around the world. In fact, it was supposed to be the emblem of the United States of America going free from slavery to Great Britain's taxation, and the Jewish people being brought to Mount Sinai en masse with 3 million people to receive the Torah on Mount Sinai. Then God turned Mount Sinai over our heads and said, do you want the Torah? And we said, when we saw God's hand in Egypt and leaving Egypt and the splitting of the sea and bringing us to Mount Sinai, it was as if God held the mountain over our heads and said, this is your Torah, this is your destiny. And we said, of course, you took us out of Egypt, you split the sea for us, you brought us to Mount Sinai, you have the clouds of glory around us, and you're giving us this document. Of course we'll keep it. For this purpose we came out of Egypt. It was in fact a matter of free choice. We willingly chose to keep the Torah as if it was so clear to us that God's power and God's destiny for us was so manifest that of course we're going to accept the Torah. Of course we're going to say Na'asa v'nishma. Of course we're going to be willingly accepting this Torah as if the mountain is over our heads. It wasn't forced upon us. It was as if we had suspended free will because we wanted lovingly to accept the Torah. It wasn't that God forced us to accept the Torah on Mount Sinai by turning the mountain over our heads. Rather, it was lovingly on our part saying, of course we'll keep the Torah. It is so clear to us that the power of manifestation of God's creation of the world and his suspension of creation through the 10 plagues and the splitting of the sea and the guiding us through history of guiding us out of Egypt and through the 10 plagues and through the splitting of the sea and through the clouds of glory, bringing us to Mount Sinai and giving us a leader, Moses, through him to give the Torah, of course we'll keep the Torah. It was as if we had no free will. We had free will, but we willingly gave up our free will to follow the will of Hashem. And therefore it seemed as if the mountain was held over our heads, and God forced us. He didn't force us to keep the Torah. We willingly and lovingly accepted the Torah because of the manifestation of God's presence.